Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Special Edition. In this episode, we will demolish soundly the biggest liar of all the globeheads. Joining me this evening is Anthony Riley and John, otherwise known as Quantum Eraser. How are you both doing, gentlemen?
Every day is a good day when you're soundly bashing.
Couldn't agree more. How are you doing, John?
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hello, hello. So I'm going to give a brief summary. Oh, someone's got their sound on.
Oh, is that me? That might be me.
Could be.
Sorry.
Could be. So brief summary. Basically, in one of the Flat Earth debate videos, John got a comment from Soundly, which both he and I pounced on. And John kind of, in the nicest possible way, said, down boy, to me. And so I had to let John take the lead with this particular comment thread. So I don't know if you want me to present you, John. Is that needed, or did you just want to do this verbally?
No, go ahead. You can present me.
Okie doke.
I'm still sharing, right?
Yep, you're up, you're on.
All right, we ready?
Yep, ready when you are.
So, the other half of the Incoherent Brothers, we have Soundly, Mr. Planet Orleans Parish, better known as the Geo Whisperer. This is from Flat Earth Debate 424 Live, a slap in the face for Sphere Earth Coriolis. So Mr. Helper, Geo Whisperer, decides to chime in and give his 2 cents worth. He says, soundly, observing a pendulum's plane changing as it swings over time is in fact observing a phenomenon. Oh, really, Mr. Magoo? So, the definition of science. The intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. See what they're tacitly saying here, it's a juxtaposition. The physical and natural as opposed to the non-physical and supernatural. Example. Can you please identify the non-physical natural for us? I mean, you'd have better chances resurrecting Alexander the Great's horse before you can provide that. So let's provide the death knell. Listen up. I'm going to read this real slow because there seems to be some confusion out there, not only with the ballers, but with everyone. So I'm going to go through this real slow, step by step. So, the definition of the natural world. All of the animals, plants, and other things existing in nature, here comes the important part, and not made or caused by people. Okay? We have nature versus made or caused by people. Is everyone clear on that? So, Geo Whisperer, are pendulums caused by people? Or do you find them wickering themselves together in the bayous down there? I mean, I've been down in some of those bayous. I haven't seen any pendulums. Physical of, relating to, or resembling material things or nature. The physical universe. I mean, they're pretty clear here in how this is defined. But just for argument's sake, let's entertain Geo Whisperer's argument and allow man-made objects as natural phenomena. And just let's see how this shakes out, because it has to logically follow. It has to be logically consistent to its conclusion. So let's take it there, shall we? So from Kennesaw State, a law describes what nature does, whereas a scientific theory, explains how nature works, right? This is a pretty good summary. I mean, if we had to have a clear, concise summary of science, I guess that's what it would be, right? So a law describes what nature does, and the theory explains how nature works. So, Mr. Magoo, are they talking about lawnmower theories and toaster oven laws? Because that's what it would lend itself to. That's your conclusion. Has anyone ever heard of these? I don't think so. And according to you, now we have pendulum theories, or is it pendulum laws? I'm just not sure. Thanks for the laughs. By the way, you'd fail 5th grade general science. So as to let Geo Whisperer, Mr. Planet Orleans Parish, hang himself, I allowed his pendulum as a natural phenomenon and asked him to scientifically validate his claim, right? I posted these 4 questions. I said, no problem. Don't worry about it. Don't get your panties in a bunch over it. We're just going to go with this. Now, we're going to eliminate this one, obviously, because I'm going to allow it. So I asked questions 2, 3, and 4. Please post the formal scientific hypothesis. Number 3, identify the independent, dependent, and control variables in the experiment. And number 4, post the null hypothesis that was rejected or falsified. These are quite reasonable. 5th grade general science graduate with a scientific claim, if asked these questions, it would take him less than 2 minutes to post the correct answers, right? So it's not unreasonable. Soundly responds to those 4 questions. One such hypothesis: a pendulum will precess as a ratio of the sine of the latitude of the experiment per day. Thanks. That's why I asked the questions. I knew you'd fall for it. Mr. Magoo, this isn't a scientific hypothesis. This rat trap right here. Number 1, from Lowell C. from Cambridge University Press. A scientific hypothesis is based on cause and effect reasoning. A scientific hypothesis does not merely state X and Y. Guess what X and Y are? It's shocking. It's the independent and dependent variables. So a scientific hypothesis does not merely state X and Y may be related, but explains why they are related, right? Too easy. I don't see any cause and effect reasoning or any reasoning in your hypothesis, Mr. Magoo, right? I don't see one here. And don't even try this sine of the latitude as your independent variable. This is tantamount to saying a grid line on a map as your independent variable. Don't even play that nonsense. And where's the Y? And the relation? Nowhere. And like I said, what's the X and the Y? I even asked you for it specifically. You still didn't provide it. Number 2, from Penn State University, the scientist applies his or her present knowledge to predict the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. The prediction is a statement of the expected results of the experiments based on the hypothesis. The prediction is often an if and then statement. Well, A, you wholesale dodge the independent and dependent variable request. B, no scientific hypothesis in the history of science ever had the word experiment in it. For goodness sakes. C, you don't have a scientific prediction because you don't have an independent variable, or a dependent variable for that matter. And D, no if and then, not a big deal. You're a train wreck besides this. It doesn't even matter. If you handed this in as a valid scientific hypothesis to pass 5th grade general science, you'd be taking it over again. And this gem. Soundly, the null hypothesis is the commonly accepted hypothesis. So in this example, we are actually testing the null hypothesis. Yeah, you in a shroom-induced coma. Are you saying this is the null? Right? Do you know what null means? A pendulum will? No. It shouldn't be not. It shouldn't be will. It should be it will not. Null? Zero difference? No effect? Does that ring true? That's a rhetorical question. Mr. Magoo, this isn't a null hypothesis because, again, a null hypothesis, the zero difference or no difference hypothesis, predicts that changing one variable, the independent variable, will have no effect on the variable being measured. That is the dependent variable. A, you don't have an independent variable change, or a dependent variable for that matter. And B, where's the no effect? Between your ears? Number two, to do a this is from California State University, Northridge. To do a hypothesis test, you will actually have two hypotheses, the null and the alternative, which are stated in such a way that they are mutually exclusive. You can't have both hypotheses be true. The null hypothesis is the conclusion that is considered the default. You will accept this hypothesis. Now get ready, because the sentence doesn't end there. If you fail to find sufficient support for the alternative hypothesis, you just don't accept it in a vacuum out of the blue. It has a conditional statement with it. A, you don't have an alternative hypothesis. And B, you never, ever, ever test the null directly, Mr. Magoo. You falsify or reject it by validating or invalidating the alternative hypothesis, right? This thing. See the connection? Which you don't have. Soundly again, Geo Whisperer. Now that I've laid this out for you in layman's terms, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. I'm laying it out for you in layman's terms too, brother. Geo Whisperer, Mr. Magoo Crayon Muncher, if you provided your above science to a 5th grade general science class, they need to be resuscitated from tear-jerk and belly laugher syndrome, and campus security would haul your dumbass away in restraints to Shady Meadows. In conclusion, diagnosis. Clinical level Dunning-Kruger with a myriad of complicated comorbidities, not limited to blind adherence to pagan religitard mythology, less than 60 level basic reasoning acumen, woeful science acumen hovering around 2nd or 3rd grade at best, and excessive crayon munching. Treatment, no known. Prognosis, dire. You're a permanent retard. And Geo Whisperer, Mr. Planet Orleans Paris, Frodley, thanks again for the belly laughs. Oh, by the way, I forgot about this. If you have more than 2 subscribers, that is your mother and GeoStreamer, by tomorrow morning, then you also paid for your subscribers, or they're all preschoolers, or have the intellectual and science acumen of a preschooler. Just to let you know. So, the Foucault pendulum. Let's take a closer look at this. From plusmaths.org. Once you set one in motion, its direction of swing will rotate at a rate of about 0.2 degrees every minute. But, in fact, it isn't really the pendulum that's rotating. The pendulum is swinging back and forth in exactly the same direction. It's the Earth which is rotating underneath the pendulum, which makes it appear that the pendulum is in fact changing direction. Now, you see this. If this is true, then why couldn't we just hover in a helicopter in North Carolina for 3 hours and catch a Dodger game? Can't wait for the answer to that question. All right, let's conclude up with this. This is a new player on the street. Assumptions. Seems like, and ironically, Anthony even posted a clip by somebody talking about assumptions. You were telling them about assumptions. And these crayon munchers jump on over this. Listen, I'm going to go through this real slow, globetards. Listen up. A scientific hypothesis is a supposition. Okay? The definition of a supposition. Something that is supposed. A hypothesis. A valid scientific hypothesis establishes a tentative possible supposed cause and effect relationship, which will either be confirmed or invalidated by the experiment. That is, a hypothesis test. You see, the cause and effect relationship is supposed. However, the independent variable, i.e. the cause, its existence isn't supposed. You follow that? Or do we need to get hooked on phonics in here? For example, alternative hypothesis. Given otherwise healthy type 1 diabetes patients, the lack of insulin on board will lead to diabetic ketoacidosis. The independent variable in this alternative hypothesis is the insulin, or lack of. The dependent variable, or the effect, or your prediction, is diabetic ketoacidosis. You see, I'm not supposing or assuming the existence of insulin. The supposition is its effects. Duh! You see what's happening here? These clueless pretender clowns are so ignorant and desperate because their incoherent goose is cooked. They think because they see the word presumed, i.e. the independent variable is the presumed cause, then that greases the skids and allows them to float presuppositions or assumptions, the usual subjects or suspects, sphere Earth and spinning Earth, etc., as independent variables, right? It's a belly laugher. You see, the independent variable's effect is presumed, not the cause, the independent variable itself. Duh.
Just sorry to interrupt, John. Can I just repeat that, just for brevity?
Yes.
So
this last part?
What John's saying is, the presumption is not that the thing itself that you are testing exists. We know vitamin C exists. It's not that you are assuming. It is the effect of the independent variable. That is the presumption. So when you say presumed cause, the actual thing you will be testing and manipulating is definitely real. You've got to be able to manipulate it. So it's not some fantasy assumption that you're going to be manipulating. Au contraire, you have to have a real thing to actually be able to vary and manipulate that independent variable. The presumption being that it will cause the effect on the dependent variable. That is the only assumption, and you validate or invalidate whether or not that is true through systematic experimentation. So you confirm or invalidate if your presumed cause does cause the effect, not that the independent variable exists. Thanks, that's all.
So let me repeat it again because we're going to finish up here real quick. The independent variable's effect is presumed. The cause is not presumed, not the cause, the independent variable itself, like he just said. Because it's getting ready to be tested, you got to have a presumption, the presumption that it's going to cause the effect. But we're not testing whether the existence of the independent variable is true. I mean, my word, people. Okay, next block of instruction, how to say the on Tuesdays. And I'm sure that's going to be a challenge for you. Thanks for your ear. Have a nice day.
Cool. As before, hopefully we can partake in a bit of soundly bashing for a few minutes and then we'll round out this show as well and say adios to the audience till tomorrow's debate. So again, are you there, Anthony? Hopefully so.
I just want to say that one of the panel guests, Jose, is currently in the area known as Pontchartrain, and armed with his camera, he will be replicating Soundly's observation over Lake Pontchartrain with the intention of trying to validate that Soundly's work is credible, repeatable, and verifiable. Now, it creates a bit of a problem because the ballers have predicted that he won't be able to repeat it. But that's a problem because if he's not able to repeat it, that means his evidence has been weakened massively because it's unverified or unverifiable evidence. If he does repeat it, then it's probably going to be flat, which then leads to the question, well, what is it that Soundly's getting that makes it so different to when Jose goes back and does it randomly? Shouldn't it be like that all the time?
No,
so make sure you
Soundly
keep your
lives
eyes
on
open for
planet
Jose
Earth.
on the next couple of shows because he's going to be hopefully presenting his evidence where he's trying to validate and verify Soundly's observations over Pontchartrain to be accurate and reliable and credible, and let's see what he gets. My bet is he's going to get it flat, straight, level, no bendiness, which is then going to make Soundly's life a little bit more awkward because he's going to have to explain why it is that his special camera is getting special evidence that nobody else, well, when we've gone to validate his work, we haven't been able to do.
So if I may, I'm just going to summarise, and then I'm going to get you to repeat what you just said, John. So again, for those who are agreeing to this subject, Soundly goes out to Pontchartrain. There's a bridge over it, and he takes what looks like curvature, visible curvature in his lens. And as Anthony's just explained, Jose's going to go out and see if he can replicate this. But it gets dubbed Planet Orleans Parish by John because the video makes it look like Earth is sort of basketball sized. It's just ludicrous.
I wouldn't make that bet, Anthony. Let me tell you why. And I think I've spoken about this before. If you ever lived in Louisiana, right? And I was stationed down there for 2 years. You can go outside. You can take a knife, right? And you can cut like a cubic meter of atmosphere out in the backyard, bring it in your house and sit on it. Just let me tell you that, man. So
sure,
all bets are off.
Sure, but on the other hand, if he is able to repeat it, then that does have really weird circumstances that makes it look that way. But if he's not able to complete, I mean, I've seen Andrew John's observation done on the same causeway with a different camera and on different circumstances, and it's flat. And that's all been disputed by the ballers because they say, well, in different conditions, you would expect it to be flat. And I'm like, no, you should always see curve, always. And then they say, well, everything looms up, refraction. But
isn't it amazing how
Andrew John and this Jose go back and get it? That's two people then that validated or failed to verify or validate the evidence in hand, and therefore Soundly's evidence cannot be credible.
If the Earth is a sphere, it's always a sphere. So the most consistent feature of any photograph should be the balliness of that sphere. Always. Yeah. That should be the predominant and prevailing feature. So the fact that every single time a photograph gets taken, we have to get down to the minutiae of the conditions and what should or shouldn't be seen based on how much the light's bending, it's ridiculous. If it's a sphere, it should be obviously and observably spherical with every photograph ever taken ever. In reality, it's quite the reverse. Every photo in history demonstrates a flat Earth.
I think the most important thing to note here is that the one that gains the most is going to be Soundly. Because Soundly must have been praying eventually some flat earther will go back and validate his work. Now, Andrew John's gone back and done it, and it was dismissed for whatever reason. Oh, because he said, in the clip, he said, that's what I've been trying to get. And it was implied by the ballers that he was trying to get it on certain weather conditions. And it could have been simply the fact that the traffic was good that day and he was able to pull over and stop or whatever reason. But the point being that that evidence that he caught on his camera was dismissed. But if Jose comes back with it and it doesn't show that bendiness, then we have a problem, don't we? Because then you've got two people that show that it's not the same, and only one person who we know that is a liar is then trying to tell the world that it's true what he sees and it's not been manipulated in any way. Yada, yada, yada. So let's see.
Go ahead, John.
I get an important point, and this has been brought up a few times, and I hear a lot of people confusing this. Empirical, the definition of empirical, it means observable, testable, repeatable, and falsifiable. Now, when people say it's repeatable, the operator isn't the observable part. The operator is the testable part. You have to be able to repeat the experimental test. Don't associate repeatability with going back and looking at observations. That's very important. Don't try to confuse that stuff, people, right? The empirical is strictly associated with the scientific method, not with just mere observations. Remember, observation or observing a phenomena is merely the first step of the scientific method. Empirical covers the whole thing.
But that's what they want to twist out of this, basically, isn't it? That's the crux of this. What they want to do is turn a concrete noun into an observed phenomena. So we, as flat earthers, look across the way and see a building and go, building.
Exactly.
They look across the way and go, building that shouldn't really be there is a slightly looming non-standard refraction hyena hologram of a building that is obscured by Earth curve that we do not see and cannot measure. Therefore, observed phenomena. Let's move forward with science. However, their science would require that the variable, in quotes, be varied, and their cause for the obstruction of something that we can see, doublespeak at its highest. So the obstruction of something that we can actually see that is actually there, that is just a concrete noun, isn't variable. They're saying Earth curve blocks it. How are you going to vary the curve of the Earth?
Exactly.
I think you have to question the validity of the refusal to accept Occam's razor on it, because Occam's razor is the one that states that the conclusion with the least amount of assumptions is probably correct. Well, if we see a building, it's just because we see it. No presumptions are required. We just see it. But on their model, you have a whole host of nonsense rhetoric that you have to try and wade your way through to explain why it's not a sphere. That's a problem, because it does foul Occam's razor. Now, it's easy to argue that Occam's razor applies so often, and I very rarely apply it. But ultimately, how much scientific process do you have to go through according to their model to come to the conclusion that, well, we live on a sphere when we see stuff that should not be there? And with the implementation of this infrared mod to the P900, I think that's just going to open up a gateway to hell for these ballers, because there's enough evidence coming out that suggests that we see significantly further than what the P900 can do anyway. So it's kind of having two P900s wrapped up into one little camera. You see the P900, and then you see the infrared bit, which is like another P900 on top of it. How much further does it need to go before people will realize that this nonsense of 76R is just not true? I can't wait for the next few months.
Indeed.
Be careful with Occam's razor, right? Because Occam's razor is just an epistemological preference or a heuristic preference, right? It has nothing to do with science or the scientific method. Zero.
Sorry, that's a new word on me. What's that? Heuristic, did you say?
Heuristic preference. Yeah, it's more.
What's that mean?
How can I say it? It doesn't have anything to do with the scientific method. The parsimony doesn't have anything to do with it. I mean, if you have two or more competing theories and the one with the fewest assumptions is most likely correct. Remember, most likely correct doesn't mean correct. And like I said, the Occam's razor doesn't have anything to do with the scientific method.
But most decisions are based on the probability, which is the most probable cause, which is the most probable reaction, which is the most probable explanation. And that's the way I look at it. I base it on the evidence, and I base it on which one's most likely, which one is the least likely of the two scenarios. And we don't live on a ball. That's why I'm on this side of the debate. I don't enjoy being on this side of the debate for most of it, but the reality, the evidence speaks for itself. It's only the science and the scientism that tells you that what you're looking at shouldn't really be seen, but it's seen because of insert suitable nonsense reason.
I do like a good new word, so we'll read the dictionary definition of heuristic just because it's cool. A heuristic technique from ancient Greek, to find or discover, often called simply a heuristic, is an approach to a problem-solving, learning or discovery that employs a practical method not guaranteed to be optimal, perfect, logical or rational, but instead sufficient for reaching an immediate... Oh, I haven't got the rest of it. ... An immediate, I think it's conclusion. Yes. Immediate decision. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Understand it?
Yes, definitely. I love a new word. I like new words. Cool. Anything else to add on the demolition of Soundley's complete nonsense when it comes to his, again, inability to comprehend science?
I just wonder what his reaction will be if it doesn't come back. If Jose's work doesn't come back with the same effect, the same results, the same outstanding position. If the outstanding position that's presented by Soundley is not verified or validated by Jose, who would be at least the second, probably more, why would that be, Soundley? How are you going to explain that? Done.
About you, John, any summary in regards to specifically the abuse of the scientific method by these people? And then we'll round out.
Yeah, they're all pretender clowns. I mean, it's obvious. I can't systematically, step by step, go through it any more thoroughly. They're pretender clown muppets. The end.
Yeah, I got Bob in the chat says, "Oh, come on, you could easily go for days with Soundly." And I think you're right, Bob. We could easily tear into Soundly for a considerably longer period, but I think I'm going to keep it fairly concise in this instance and just tear apart his science acumen. So with that, I'm going to say first and foremost a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Anthony and John for joining us on this Flat Earth special edition. Thank you both.
No worries.
My pleasure, sir.
And of course, a massive, huge, enormous thank you to all of the live audience for tuning in and hopefully sharing this discussion with Soundly. If you hated the show, then you know exactly what to do, but if you like the show, maybe consider sharing it with a friend or subscribing if you've not done so already. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!